The Christmas lights on my parents' house sparkled like something out of a holiday movie, but I wasn't invited to enjoy them. Instead, my mother folded her arms and pointed toward the freezing garage. "You'll sleep out there," she said without a hint of guilt. "Your cousin Emily needs the guest room. She's family." I stood there holding my suitcase, trying to understand how I'd become the outsider in the home I'd spent years quietly protecting. My father looked away, pretending he had nothing to do with it. Neither of them knew the biggest secret in the room. 3 months earlier, the deed to this very house had been legally transferred into my name. Every mortgage payment had come from my company. Every legal document carried my signature. They thought they were humiliating me on Christmas Eve. What they didn't realize was that, by sunrise, everything they believed they owned was about to change forever. Welcome back to Revenge Stories. If you enjoy emotional family drama, shocking betrayals, and satisfying revenge stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Let's start today's story. My name is Sophie Carter, and until that Christmas, I believed loyalty could fix almost anything. I was 32 and lived in Denver, Colorado, where I'd built a commercial real estate investment company from the ground up. Most people assumed my success came easily. They never saw the 16-hour workdays, the failed deals, or the years spent saying no to vacations because I was chasing stability instead of comfort. My parents, Richard and Linda Carter, loved telling relatives that my achievements were a family success. The truth was different. Whenever they needed help, I was the first person they called. A late mortgage payment, medical bills, credit card debt. I always helped, not because they demanded it, but because I believed families should protect each other. Then Emily came back into our lives. My cousin had a talent for making every conversation about herself. She'd bounce from one failed job to another, yet somehow my parents treated her like she could do no wrong. By Thanksgiving, I noticed something had changed. Every phone call ended with, "Emily's having a hard time." Every family dinner became a celebration of Emily's fresh start. And somehow, I was the one expected to pay for it. I ignored the feeling growing in my stomach, until my mother called 3 days before Christmas. "Sophie," she said cheerfully, "we've made a few sleeping arrangements for the holidays." I smiled, unaware that those simple words were the beginning of the biggest betrayal my family had ever planned. "I'll be there Friday afternoon," I told my mom. "Perfect," she replied. "And Sophie, don't bring too much luggage." The comment felt strange, but I brushed it off. My parents had always been a little disorganized when hosting family gatherings. 2 days later, I pulled into the driveway of the house where I'd grown up. Christmas decorations covered every inch of the front yard. Through the living room window, I could already see relatives laughing around the tree. Before I could knock, Emily opened the front door. "There she is," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The businesswoman finally made time for us." I forced a polite smile. "Merry Christmas, Emily." Inside, my aunts, uncles, and cousins greeted me warmly. But something felt rehearsed. Conversations stopped for a split second whenever I walked into a room, then picked up again as if nothing had happened. My father barely looked up from his recliner. "You're late," he muttered. "It took almost 2 hours because of traffic." He simply nodded and went back to watching football. An hour later, dinner was almost ready when my mother clapped her hands. "Everyone, before we eat, we need to make one small announcement." The room fell silent. She wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulders. "Since Emily has been through such a difficult year, we've decided she deserves the guest suite. It's the biggest room in the house." Several relatives nodded sympathetically. Then my mother turned toward me. "As for you, Sophie," she said with an almost casual smile, "dear father cleaned out the garage. There's a folding cot out there. You'll only be here for a couple of nights, so I'm sure you won't mind." The room became painfully quiet. A few relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one spoke. Emily lowered her head, pretending to feel embarrassed, though I caught the brief smirk that appeared the moment no one else was looking. I looked at my parents, waiting for one of them to laugh and admit it was a terrible joke. Neither of them did. I could have argued. I could have reminded everyone that I had paid for Thanksgiving dinner the month before, covered my father's surgery deductible, and wired money whenever my parents claimed they were just a little short. Instead, I smiled. "If that's what you want," I said calmly. The silence in the dining room became even heavier. Emily looked disappointed. She had expected tears, maybe even a shouting match. Instead, I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the garage without another word. The garage was cold but clean. A folding cot sat in the corner beside a dusty workbench. A small space heater hummed quietly. My father appeared in the doorway. "Don't make a scene," he said. "It's Christmas." I met his eyes. "I'm not the one making a scene." He frowned but walked away without another word. After changing into warmer clothes, I sat on the edge of the cot and looked around the garage. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel Brooks, my attorney. "Everything is finalized. The certified copies are in your email. Let me know when you're ready." I stared at the message for a few seconds before locking my phone. Not tonight. Christmas Eve wasn't the time to turn my family's world upside down. I slipped the phone into my pocket and walked back into the house. The smell of roasted turkey filled the dining room, but the warmth disappeared the moment I sat down. My mother raised her glass. "To family," she said proudly. "The people who always put each other first." The words almost made me laugh. Across the table, my Aunt Karen gave me a sympathetic look. "Sophie, are you really sleeping in the garage?" Before I could answer, my mother interrupted. "Oh, don't make it sound so dramatic. It's heated," Emily added with a fake smile. "Besides, Sophie spends all her time in luxury hotels. One night in a garage might keep her humble." A few people chuckled nervously. I didn't. I simply cut another piece of turkey and continued eating. That seemed to bother Emily more than any argument could have. She leaned forward. "You've been so successful lately," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I guess money really changes people." I finally looked up. "No," I replied calmly. "Money doesn't change people. It just gives them the chance to show everyone who they already were." The table fell silent. Emily's smile disappeared. And for the first time that evening, my father looked genuinely nervous. The rest of dinner passed in strained silence. No one brought up my comment again, but I noticed the sideways glances. My relatives weren't blind. They could see something was wrong, they just didn't know how deep it went. After dessert, everyone gathered in the living room to exchange early Christmas gifts. Emily sat in the best chair beside the fireplace, as if she owned the place. My mother handed her a small velvet box. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Emily opened it and gasped. "A diamond bracelet? Aunt Linda, it's beautiful." The room filled with applause. Then my mother turned to me and handed me a thin envelope. "Merry Christmas, Sophie." Inside was a $20 coffee shop gift card. I smiled politely. "Thank you." It wasn't the amount that hurt. It was the message. For years, I'd quietly paid their bills, replaced their leaking roof, and even covered 6 months of mortgage payments when my father's business failed. And somehow, I had become the least important person in the room. Later that evening, I stepped onto the back porch to get some fresh air. Snow drifted gently across the yard. A familiar voice broke the silence. "I've been looking for you." It was my Aunt Karen. She wrapped her coat tighter against the cold. "I'm sorry about tonight," she said softly. "Your parents have been acting different." "What do you mean?" She hesitated before answering. "They've been telling everyone that Emily is the one who's always helping them financially." I stared at her. "They said she's been paying the mortgage and keeping the house from foreclosure." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Emily? Paying the mortgage? That was impossible. Every payment had come directly from my company's account for nearly 3 years. Aunt Karen searched my face. "I knew something didn't sound right," she whispered. "That's why I wanted to tell you." I thanked her, but inside, the pieces were finally starting to fit together. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. Someone had been rewriting the truth. As I walked back toward the garage, my phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't my attorney. It was a notification from my home's security system. "Front door unlocked. New access code created." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't at my house, so who had just let themselves in? I stopped walking and opened the security app. The alert was real. New user added. Access code accepted. Only 2 people had authorization to make changes, me and the property management company that handled my Denver home while I traveled. I immediately called the emergency contact listed on my account. "Good evening, Miss Carter," the manager answered. "Is everything all right? I just received an alert saying someone created a new access code." There was a brief pause as he checked the system. "Yes, ma'am. Earlier today, we received a signed authorization requesting temporary access for your parents." The signature appeared to match the one we have on file. My expression hardened. "I never signed anything." The manager's tone changed instantly. "In that case, I'll disable every code and review the security footage." "Please do, and email me everything right away." I ended the call, my mind racing. Someone had forged my signature. The question was, who? When I returned to the house, laughter echoed from the living room. I paused in the hallway as I heard my mother's voice. "Sophie doesn't need that big house anyway," she said with a laugh. "She's never home." Emily giggled. "Maybe she'll finally let us stay there whenever we want." My father added quietly, "Once everything is settled, it won't even be an issue." My grip tightened around my phone. Once everything is settled? Settled how? Before I could hear more, the front doorbell rang. My uncle opened it. A man in a dark winter coat stood outside, holding a large certified envelope. "Delivery for Ms. Sophie Carter." The room fell silent as every eye turned toward me. I accepted the envelope and glanced at the sender. Brooks and Harlan, attorneys at law. Daniel hadn't mentioned sending anything to my parents' house. My mother smiled nervously. "What is that?" I looked down at the envelope, then back at everyone gathered around the Christmas tree. "I think," I said calmly, "it's the document that's going to answer a lot of questions." No one realized that inside that envelope was the first piece of evidence that would unravel every lie my family had been telling. The room was so quiet, I could hear the fire crackling in the fireplace. My mother tried to laugh. "Well, aren't you going to open it?" "I will," I replied, "just not tonight." I placed the sealed envelope beside my suitcase. Emily rolled her eyes. "Always so dramatic. I've learned important documents deserve the right time and place." My father stared at the envelope longer than anyone else. For the first time that evening, he looked uneasy. A few minutes later, everyone drifted back to their conversations. But I noticed something strange. My parents kept whispering to each other. Every few seconds, one of them glanced toward the envelope. Around midnight, I returned to the garage. As soon as I closed the door, my phone rang. It was Daniel. "I saw the delivery confirmation," he said. "Did you receive the package?" "I did." "Good. Don't let anyone else open it." "I won't." He lowered his voice. "There's another issue." "What happened?" "The property manager sent me security footage from your Denver house." My stomach tightened. "And?" "It shows your parents entering the property this afternoon." I froze. "They used a key. They also carried several empty storage boxes inside." The words hit me like ice water. "They weren't visiting," Daniel continued. "Based on the footage, it looks like they intended to move belongings into the house." I looked toward the door leading back into the house, where my parents were celebrating Christmas as if nothing had happened. "They don't even have permission to be there." "I know." Daniel paused before adding, "The footage is being backed up. If this turns into a legal matter, we'll have clear evidence." I thanked him and ended the call. Sleep was impossible. Just after 2 a.m., I heard footsteps outside the garage. Slow, careful. Someone was trying not to make a sound. A shadow appeared beneath the door. Then the handle moved, very slowly. Someone was trying to get inside. I didn't move. The garage door handle turned halfway before stopping. Whoever was outside hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. A thin beam of light slipped inside. It wasn't a stranger. It was my mother. She thought I was asleep. Without saying a word, she walked straight toward my suitcase. I stayed perfectly still, my eyes barely open. She knelt beside it and quietly searched through the front pocket, then the side compartment. When she didn't find what she was looking for, she whispered under her breath, "It has to be here." A second shadow appeared in the doorway. My father. "Did you find it?" He whispered. "No. Keep looking." My heart pounded, but I kept breathing steadily. They weren't checking on me, they were searching my belongings. After another minute, my mother zipped the suitcase closed. "It's not here," she said. My father glanced toward me to make sure I was still asleep. "Then the lawyer must still have it. The transfer can't be completed until we get those papers." "Transfer? What transfer?" Before I could think further, my father quietly closed the garage door behind them. I waited another 30 seconds before reaching for my phone. Without making a sound, I opened the security app connected to the small travel camera I always carried for business trips. Earlier that evening, I'd placed it on a shelf facing the cot. Everything had been recorded. Every word, every movement. I saved the video to cloud storage and sent a copy directly to Daniel with one message. "Watch from 2:07 a.m. Less than a minute later, he replied, "Do not confront them. They're looking for something they believe will give them control. Let them keep talking." I locked my phone and stared at the garage ceiling. Whatever my parents were planning had started long before Christmas, and judging by their panic, they believed they were running out of time. The next morning, I woke to loud voices coming from inside the house. Someone was arguing. Then I heard Emily shout, "What do you mean the bank won't recognize my authorization?" I walked into the kitchen just as Emily slammed her phone onto the counter. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. My mother hurried over. "Lower your voice. The bank said they won't discuss the property with me because I'm not listed as an owner or an authorized representative." My father pulled Emily aside, but I had already heard enough. "Property? Which property?" Emily noticed me standing in the doorway and immediately forced a smile. "Morning, Sophie." "Morning." She folded her arms. "Some people make simple things unnecessarily complicated." I poured myself a cup of coffee, usually because they're trying to do something they aren't authorized to do. Her smile faded. For the next few minutes, no one said a word. Then my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Call me when you're alone. It's important." I stepped outside onto the back porch and returned the call. "I reviewed the garage recording," he said. "And? It confirms they were searching for legal documents." I looked through the window at my parents. "What documents?" "The original trust paperwork." I frowned. "What trust?" Daniel took a slow breath. "The one created by your grandfather." I felt the world stop for a moment. My grandfather never mentioned a trust. That's because he asked me not to discuss it until the conditions were met. My grandfather had passed away 4 years earlier. He'd always told me to work hard and trust actions more than words. Now I wondered how much he'd seen before he died. Daniel continued. "The envelope you received last night contains a certified copy of the trust and a letter written by your grandfather." My grip tightened on the phone. "A letter?" "Yes. He wanted you to read it only if your parents ever proved they couldn't be trusted." Before I could respond, I heard the back door open. My father stepped onto the porch. "There you are," he said with an uneasy smile. "We're taking a family photo before lunch." I slipped my phone into my pocket. "I'll be there in a minute." He nodded, but instead of walking away, his eyes drifted to the attorney's envelope resting on the table beside me. Then he asked the one question that confirmed every suspicion I'd had since arriving. "Sophie, have you opened your grandfather's letter yet?" I looked from my father to the sealed envelope. "No," I answered evenly. "Why?" He hesitated just long enough to give himself away. "No reason," he said with a forced smile. "I was just curious. Curiosity usually has a reason." His smile disappeared for a split second before he shrugged and walked back inside. I watched him through the glass door. The moment he reached the kitchen, he leaned toward my mother and Emily. All three of them looked in my direction. They weren't wondering what was in the envelope. They already knew. The question was how. I picked up the envelope and carried it to my car instead of back into the house. After locking the doors, I finally broke the seal. Inside were 3 documents and a handwritten letter. The first document was a copy of the trust. The second was the recorded deed, showing the house had been legally transferred into my name 3 months earlier. The third was a notarized affidavit signed by my grandfather's longtime attorney. Then I unfolded the letter. "My dear Sophie," it began, "if you're reading this, then something has happened that I prayed never would. I built this family with honesty, but I've watched greed grow where gratitude should have been." My chest tightened. The house is no longer a gift. It's a responsibility. I chose you because you earned trust instead of demanding it. I kept reading. Your parents don't know the full terms of the trust. They believe they'll inherit everything automatically. They won't. I turned the page. The final paragraph made my heart race. If anyone attempts to obtain this property through deception, fraud, or forged documents, my attorney has instructions to begin legal proceedings immediately. I slowly lowered the letter. So Grandpa had anticipated this. He had seen the cracks in the family years before anyone else admitted they existed. Just then, my phone rang. It was the property manager. "Miss Carter?" he said urgently. "You need to see the latest security footage." "What happened?" "Your parents didn't leave your Denver house empty yesterday." He paused. "They took something with them. And after reviewing the cameras, I think I know exactly what it was." "What did they take?" I asked. The property manager exhaled slowly. "They removed a locked fireproof document box from your home office." My pulse quickened. "The black safe box?" "Yes, ma'am." I closed my eyes for a second. That box didn't contain cash or jewelry. It held years of legal records, property contracts, and original financial documents, including paperwork connected to my parents' mortgage assistance. "Did they manage to open it?" "No. The box was still locked when they carried it out." "Send me every camera angle. They're already uploading to your secure folder." I thanked him and ended the call. As I walked back toward the house, I realized something. My parents hadn't been looking for the trust because they already had it. They'd been looking for the key to the document box. When I stepped inside, the atmosphere had changed. Emily was smiling again, too confidently. She walked over carrying a mug of hot chocolate. "Here," she said sweetly. "Thought you might be cold after sleeping in the garage." I accepted the mug. "Thank you." She tilted her head. "You know, families shouldn't keep secrets from each other." I held her gaze. "I agree." For a brief moment, neither of us looked away. Then my father cleared his throat. "Sophie, after lunch, we'd like to discuss the future of this house." "The future?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "It's time we made some decisions as a family." I almost smiled. They believed they were about to negotiate from a position of strength. They had no idea that every forged signature, every lie, and now the theft of my document box had been captured on camera. I sat down at the dining table. "Of course," I said calmly. "Let's talk about ownership." The color drained from Emily's face, and for the first time since I arrived, no one at the table seemed eager to start the conversation. Lunch was served, but almost no one touched their food. The tension at the table was impossible to ignore. My father cleared his throat. "Sophie, your mother and I have been thinking about the future. This house has always been the family's home. We believe it should stay that way." "I agree," I said calmly. Relief flashed across his face. Then I added, "The question is, who should be responsible for it?" Emily leaned forward. "Someone who actually wants a family here." I looked at her. "And what makes you think I don't?" She didn't answer. Instead, my mother reached into a folder beside her chair and slid several papers across the table. "We've already spoken with an advisor," she said. "These documents would make everything simpler." I glanced at the first page. It was a quitclaim deed. They wanted me to sign away any future interest they believed I had in the property. I almost laughed. They were asking me to give up rights to a house they didn't realize I already legally owned. "I'll pass," I said, sliding the papers back. My father's expression hardened. "Don't be stubborn. I'm being careful." Emily crossed her arms. "If you really cared about this family, you'd sign." I met her eyes. "If you really cared about this family, you wouldn't pressure someone to sign legal documents during Christmas lunch." Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. My Aunt Karen finally spoke. "Richard, Linda, why are lawyers involved with a family house in the first place?" Neither of my parents answered. The silence said more than words ever could. Just then, my phone vibrated. A message from Daniel appeared on the screen. "Do not sign anything. Also, the Denver police have recovered your document box. It was abandoned behind a shopping center less than 5 miles from your house." My heart skipped. Abandoned? Whoever took it had realized they couldn't open it. Then another message arrived. "One more thing. Officers found fingerprints on the box. The preliminary report matches someone in your family." I slowly locked my phone and looked up. Across the table, Emily was nervously rubbing her hands together. For the first time, I wasn't wondering whether she was involved. I was wondering how much she had already confessed without realizing it. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and kept my expression neutral. No one at the table knew that the evidence was growing by the hour. Emily broke the silence. "So, are you going to sign or not?" "No." The answer was calm, simple, and final. She scoffed. "You're unbelievable." "Maybe," I replied, "but I never sign legal documents without my attorney." My father's jaw tightened. "Since when do you need a lawyer for family matters?" "Since family matters started involving legal paperwork." The room fell silent again. My Aunt Karen slowly pushed her plate away. "Richard," she said, "what exactly are you asking Sophie to give up?" Before he could answer, my mother jumped in. "It's just paperwork. Nothing important." I looked at the stack of documents. "If it's not important, then you won't mind if my attorney reviews every page first." Emily stood up so quickly, her chair scraped across the floor. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I calmly folded my napkin. "No, Emily, I'm making it legal." Her face flushed. She stormed out of the dining room, slamming the back door behind her. A few relatives exchanged worried looks. 5 minutes later, I stepped outside for some air. Emily was standing near the garage, speaking on the phone in a hushed voice. She hadn't noticed me. "I told you she won't sign," she whispered angrily. A pause. "No, she still hasn't opened everything." Another pause. "I don't care what Grandpa wrote. We need those papers before Monday." My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. When people panicked, they made mistakes. And Emily had just made one. As she ended the call and turned around, she froze. Our eyes met. She realized I had heard enough to know she wasn't acting alone. But before either of us could say a word, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. 2 people stepped out. One wore a business suit. The other carried a leather briefcase with the logo of Brooks and Harlan Attorneys at Law. Daniel had arrived, and judging by the look on his face, he hadn't come alone just to celebrate Christmas. Every conversation in the house stopped as Daniel and the woman beside him walked to the front door. Daniel smiled when he saw me. "Good afternoon, Sophie. Glad you made it." He turned toward my parents, Richard, Linda. Neither of them returned the greeting. The woman beside him opened her briefcase and introduced herself. "My name is Rebecca Lawson. I'm a licensed notary and legal witness." My mother's face immediately lost color. "A notary? On Christmas?" Daniel nodded calmly. "Some matters can't wait." My father folded his arms. "Whatever this is, it can wait until after the holidays." "I'm afraid it can't," Daniel replied. "It concerns the legal ownership of this property." The room fell silent. Emily took a nervous step backward. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Daniel removed a certified folder from his briefcase, the deed recorded with the county 3 months ago. My father laughed nervously. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Daniel handed him a certified copy. I watched as my father's confidence disappeared line by line. His hands began to shake. My mother grabbed the document. "No." She flipped to the final page. There it was, the county seal, the recording number, and my name, Sophie Carter. Emily snatched the papers from her. "This has to be fake." Rebecca calmly spoke for the first time. "It isn't. I personally verified the certified copies before we came here." Emily stared at me in disbelief. "You own this house?" I met her eyes. "I have for 3 months." No one spoke. Even the relatives who knew nothing about the situation looked stunned. My father finally found his voice. "You planned this?" I shook my head. "No, Grandpa did." Daniel reached into his briefcase once more. "And we're not finished." He placed another sealed folder on the table. "This one doesn't concern ownership. It concerns fraud." The word hit the room harder than any shout ever could. Then Daniel looked directly at my parents, and before anyone says another word, he slowly opened the folder. Inside were photographs, security images, and documents that no one in the room expected to see. Daniel spread the documents across the dining table one by one. No dramatic speeches, just facts. The first photo showed my parents entering my Denver home. The second captured them carrying out the black, fireproof document box. The third showed the box abandoned behind a shopping center less than an hour later. Emily's face turned pale. My father stared at the pictures without saying a word. Daniel placed a printed report beside them. These images were provided by the property's licensed security company. The chain of custody has been preserved. Rebecca nodded. I've verified the copies. Then Daniel slid over another document. The preliminary fingerprint report. He looked directly at my father. Mr. Carter, your fingerprints were found on the exterior of the document box. He turned to Emily, and yours were found on both carrying handles. Emily's voice trembled. That doesn't prove anything. No, Daniel agreed. By itself, it doesn't. He reached into his briefcase one last time. But this helps. He connected a small speaker to his phone. A familiar recording filled the room. Did you find it? My father's voice. No. My mother's whisper. Keep looking. The transfer can't be completed until we get those papers. The garage recording. No one moved. My aunt covered her mouth. My uncle slowly lowered his head. The recording continued until the garage door closed. Daniel stopped the audio. The recording was legally obtained from Ms. Carter's personal travel camera inside the area where she was sleeping. My father finally stood. You recorded us? I recorded my own sleeping area, I answered calmly. You entered it without permission. He had no response. Daniel folded his hands. We also have evidence of a forged authorization sent to the Denver property manager. My mother's knees nearly gave out as she grabbed the back of a chair. Rebecca quietly added, forgery. Attempted unauthorized access to private property and theft are serious matters under Colorado law. The room was silent. Then Emily looked at my parents with panic in her eyes. You told me this wasn't illegal. For the first time, she had admitted she knew exactly what they were trying to do. Emily's words hung in the air. You told me this wasn't illegal. No one spoke. My mother reached for her hand. Emily, stop talking. But it was too late. Daniel calmly closed the folder. Thank you, he said. That statement confirms you believed there was a plan. Emily's eyes widened as she realized what she'd just admitted. I didn't mean... You don't have to explain, Daniel interrupted. If this matter goes to court, everyone will have the opportunity to testify under oath. My father finally broke. He sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I looked at him quietly. Then how was it supposed to happen? He couldn't answer. Instead, my mother did. We were drowning in debt, Sophie. We thought, if the house and your Denver property were under family control, we could refinance everything. Family control? I asked. You mean your control? Tears filled her eyes. We thought you'd forgive us after it was done. I shook my head. You didn't ask for help. You forged documents. You entered my home without permission. You searched my belongings while I slept. Neither of them denied it. Daniel stood. Sophie, the decision is yours. You have sufficient evidence to pursue both civil claims and request criminal investigation. Every relative turned toward me. No one knew what I would do. After a long silence, I spoke. I won't make this decision today. My parents looked up with a flicker of hope. But don't mistake patience for forgiveness. I picked up my grandfather's letter and placed it on the table. He spent his entire life building this family. You nearly destroyed it in one Christmas. Just then, Daniel's phone vibrated. He read the message once. Then he looked at me. Sophie, the district attorney's office has already reviewed the initial evidence. They've made a decision. The entire room held its breath as Daniel slowly lowered his phone. Daniel looked around the room before speaking. The district attorney has decided that the evidence is sufficient to open a formal investigation. They'll determine whether criminal charges are appropriate, but that's no longer our decision. My mother's shoulders slumped. My father closed his eyes. Emily quietly sat down, realizing the consequences had finally caught up with them. I took a deep breath. Daniel, I have one request. He nodded. I'm listening. I don't want revenge driven by anger. I want accountability. He smiled slightly. That's exactly what your grandfather hoped you'd say. Over the next several months, the investigation confirmed everything. The forged authorization, the unauthorized entry into my Denver home, the attempted misuse of legal documents, and the theft of my document box were all documented through security footage, recordings, and witness statements. Rather than fight a lengthy court battle, my parents accepted responsibility through a legal settlement negotiated by their attorneys. They repaid every financial loss, surrendered any claim they believed they had to the house, and issued written apologies to every family member they had misled. Emily admitted she had followed my parents' instructions without understanding the full legal consequences. She cooperated with investigators, accepted responsibility for her actions, and eventually rebuilt her life on her own instead of depending on others. As for the house, I kept it exactly as my grandfather intended, not because it was valuable, because it represented honesty. A year later, I invited the entire family back for Christmas. Only those who had treated others with respect received an invitation. There were no secret agendas, no legal documents waiting on the table, just laughter, warm food, and the kind of peace my grandfather had always wanted for us. Before dinner, I placed his framed photograph beside the Christmas tree. "For you, Grandpa," I whispered. "You were right to trust actions over words." As snow began falling outside, I realized something I hadn't understood a year earlier. The greatest victory wasn't owning the house. It was refusing to let betrayal change the person I chose to be. The end. Thanks for watching.